Hello and welcome back to a brand new episode of Only a Bag, an Italy travel podcast. I'm Nathaniel Malor.
And I'm Darcy Melton.
And today we're going to be continuing sort of where we left off, talking about how to live in Italy. And we're going to be talking about work visa and other visas, which is a kind of a mouthful.
Yeah, but I'm excited for it. And before we get started, we want to thank everybody who have been following us and leaving reviews. And if you want to contact us, you can find our website, which is onlyabag.com. We have lots of articles, and it's new and fresh and lots of cool. What? It's very cool.
It's very cool.
That's the phrase. And you can also find us on Blue Sky now at Only a Bag.
We've transitioned away from Instagram. So thank you to everyone who did follow us on Instagram. And also, if you have a Blue Sky, you could follow us there instead. We are transitioning to Blue Sky instead, since it seems better for podcasts anyway. It seems a lot of people have more success on a sort of Twitter-like platform.
Yeah.
And I will say last very thing with the website, it is brand new, very fresh, very interesting. If you see something that's broken, say something to the people who made it, which is us. Thank you, MTA, for that fun little line. But, right, MTA, New York City? But yes, it is brand new. I tried checking out everything to make sure all the links work and everything goes to where it's supposed to. But if you are there reading, please let us know if something's broken. The other thing I wanted to say is you might notice there are ads on the website. That is very fresh, brand new. We just did that. We're just kind of checking it out, trying it out, seeing how it works. The two of us hate ads. We imagine that you also hate ads. If you use an ad block, we fully support that. However, we would like to eventually save up money for new microphones and other things for the podcast and other things for the website. And it seems like a good way to do that is through ads and affiliate links. So unfortunately, we are buying into the ecosystem. So thank you again, though, to everybody who does go to the website and enjoys the information despite the ads. So let's talk about the visas. And it's going to be work visa, but we're going to actually talk about that third. There are two other visas that aren't quite work visas that I thought we would talk about first.
Okay.
And that would be the first one for those of you listening from Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and South Korea.
Hello to all of you.
And I know actually on Spotify, I looked first because I wanted to know. And on Spotify, it's like 9% of our listeners are from Canada. I think it's like 6 or 7% from Australia, 2% from New Zealand, and I think like under 1% from South Korea. But we wanted to address that, the group of you first, because there is a working holiday visa for Italy if you are not aware already. I assume you are. I assume maybe it's something that, I don't know, like they pass out a piece of paper in school letting you know, like now that you're 18, you can go to Italy and work. I don't know if that's a thing, but because we're talking about the work visa today, we thought we'd also talk about this working holiday visa very, very briefly. And essentially, if you're between the ages of 18 and 30 from Australia, New Zealand, or South Korea, I think it's those three, yeah, then you are between 18 and 30, you're able to apply for this. And up to 35 from Canada, the visa lasts for 1 year. You have to work for 6 months of those months, 6 months of that year, and for 3 different employers. There is a ridiculous amount of math going into this. I don't understand, but 3 different employers in 6 months, within a year. It seems kind of an interesting, neat way if you are young or just kind of exploring options or just wanting to get out of town for a bit. It does seem like a phenomenal way to experience Italy. And I mean, doing so without any sort of real commitment to Italy, if that makes sense, without having to like relocate to Italy.
And fewer obligations as far as paperwork and applications and things like that.
Absolutely. So that was the first one. And if you're listening from America, which is like 70-something% of our followers, that does not apply to you, unfortunately, because Australia has a working holiday visa agreement with a lot of other countries. And I think that America is one of the few it doesn't, because America doesn't have a working holiday visa. So there's nothing reciprocal. The other one we wanted to talk about before getting into the work visa is what's called the elective residency visa. It is essentially the retirement visa, though you don't actually have to be of retirement age to apply for this fun little visa. If you are retirement age, fantastic. It's probably a lot easier if we're being honest. And essentially, the reason we wanted to hit this one is because if you have some form of income that makes you able to clear, I think, 30,000 for one person, 38 for 2 people, and it increases by 20% for every person after, and every dependent after that. So children, parents, I don't know what else would consider a dependent in this case, but typically for Italy, it's children and parents that are reliant on you. Then you can apply for this elective residency visa, which just means as long as you have a place to live in Italy, you have to prove that ahead of time. And as long as you can create 30,000 euros or 40,000 or whatever it is a year through, essentially they want it through passive income. So it has to be through a retirement or through Social Security or through renting. I mean, some people just rent out their house, and Italy's totally fine with that. If you are like, I mean, if you're listening to this from San Francisco, New York City, Denver, or I don't know, something where you can easily clear 30,000 euros a year renting out your house, then yeah, that's totally fine as well. Or if you're from we're from Savannah in the States, and if you're renting your house for $1,500 a year, a month, and then you're going to make the rest up through either Social Security or something like that, that's totally fine. The big thing is you just can't work, and you cannot work both online or also in Italy. And when I say online, I do mean like they don't want you running a small business from Italy on this visa. They prefer, if you're going to do that, that you're on the self-employment visa and paying taxes to Italy. So it's really just kind of the retirement visa by another name.
Oh, so taxes are different on the retirement visa than they would be on the work visa.
Yes, because there really aren't any taxes on the retirement visa in terms of you're not supposed to be making any money.
Yeah.
And whatever money
in
you're
Italy,
making
you'd be
in
making
Italy.
passive income through Social Security or retirement plan, or
Exactly,
like you
through
said,
your home
renting.
country.
Okay,
Yeah.
in your home country.
So it's one of those things where they're assuming you're paying taxes on that, and then everything else. I mean, because I think the trade-off is you're also spending like a lot of money in Italy every year.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like, yeah, if you want to spend that 20, 30 grand in Italy every year, we appreciate that. Thanks for contributing to the small economy. And those, I think, are the two big ones. And I guess technically we're going to get into it a little later in the work visa, very briefly, but we are going to we're going to look at that digital nomad visa, but we are going to do a whole separate episode on the digital nomad visa because I think it deserves its own space.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So thank you so much for letting me monologue at our dear listeners as quick as possible. What is that, 6 minutes, 7 minutes? That's not too bad.
That was a good nutshelling of those two visa options.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I worked on that. I was practicing the mirror. So let's talk about the work visa. We have like one mirror in this house, and it makes us both look awful.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
we only have one mirror.
Well, I think in the bathroom mirror. So the bathroom and the wardrobe. The wardrobe one is awful.
Yeah.
The bathroom
I also think it's like a portal to another world.
Yeah, it's very much Narnia, a very Narnia wardrobe that we have.
Yeah.
And so that really is not important to the work visa at all, but it's just something in case.
Just a fun tidbit about our lives.
It really is, yeah. A little glimpse into who we are. So this work visa, how do we want to start? How do we want to introduce it to our listeners?
I don't know. We should be positive.
We should be positive.
I think that means you should start.
Let's start with the carrot instead of the stick.
Yes.
And I see the stick being the job, to be very clear. There's no like bad part about it necessarily. There are many benefits, I think, to the work visa in Italy. And in no real particular order, I wanted to give 3 or 4 of those, I guess those benefits that you hear about when you're living in the United States, especially. Very interestingly, when you look at which countries have a national I guess it's like
required vacation, mandatory vacation.
I think United States is literally one of like a handful of countries that doesn't have it. Mm-hmm. And I mean, a lot of countries you would not think of having it has mandatory vacation.
A lot of countries without many human rights
has mandatory vacation. It's wild to me. So that's something that's fascinating when a lot of jobs in the United States do not supply or do not provide a mandatory vacation or have no obligation to do so. And I think they've landed on 2 weeks as a sort of which is really 10 days as a thing plus any bank holidays. So it ends up being the 10 days plus whatever 4 or 5 bank holidays you get in the year kind of thing. So it's not a lot, and that's not required by law. That's just out of the goodness of their hearts.
Yeah,
and
wild.
They probably wouldn't find anybody working there. And I think in the United States, something we hear about often is that Europeans have these like crazy times off, like, oh, you can get like, a year of vacation time off or whatever it is. And it depends by country to country. It's very different. And I know that like France, that we were looking to France a while ago, and it's common that some places even give 8 weeks paid vacation, and some give less, some give more. Italy specifically has a national requirement of 4 weeks paid vacation. This is using the exact same system as America. So when they say that, they mean actually just 20 days. I assume everybody says, when they say like 4 weeks or whatever it is, they just mean 4 work weeks of paid vacation. And So yeah, you get 4 weeks of paid vacation, but for a lot of companies, it's closer to 5 or 6, sometimes more. That increases with seniority. And this does apply for, it seems like, and everything I could find is even if you work for an American company in Italy, they still have to abide by that national law. They can't circumvent it. So, which is, I guess, one of the reasons that sometimes some companies don't have an Italian branch or a European branch, because they all of a sudden, you have people working in the States and they're like, oh yeah, but in Italy, they're off the entire month of, August. And we've talked about that before in the Ferragosto. August 15th is major holiday here. So people typically take about 2 weeks off, but it's it's common to take the entire month off of August.
Mm-hmm.
So nice little benefit for those of you who are looking to come. And so yeah, it's 4 weeks with usually 5 or 6 is what's being offered. And that doesn't include the 12 national bank holidays. It's 10 holidays, but you get 2 days off for Christmas and 2 days off for Easter.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's technically Easter Monday, but also either they'll give you that Friday off or the Tuesday off, depending, because any national holiday that falls on a Sunday, the company is required by law to give you either the following Monday off, or if the following Monday is also a holiday, then some other day in that area. So you can make basically a little vacation by yourself or with your family, go somewhere for 4 days. The other thing you get is each town or city or wherever you live gets 1 day off a year.
Mm-hmm. Like for their patron saint, right?
Typically it's for their patron saint. So I think like Rome has one, Milan has one, Venice has one. Even when we are a super tiny town, but San Michele, St. Michael, it's the patron saint of the town. So on that day, even national company, like the bank, the national bank or whatever it is, has to give that day off because that's the day the town has asked for, or the post office or whatever it is. So there's a lot of, the post office seems like they're off all the time, to be honest. I don't understand like when they do work. If you're looking for jobs, by the way, the post office, great job. It's like 8 o'clock to 1:30 and then that's it.
I think it's a very difficult job to get though.
It must be. And they don't retire but it's like, no offense, I love them. They're also just not like the best at the job potentially in Italy.
It depends. Some of the each post office is so different, and
That's
even like the sometimes the not amenities. What's the word? The services that they provide can be different. Not because they have to be, but I just think it's like a provincial versus big city thing. But sometimes the people in the big cities, though, they have to process a lot of people, and they do, like we've talked about before. The post office serves as a lot of different sort of entities, like as a bank and the actual post office, and then they just process a lot of different things.
And you can get your internet through them, your gas, electric, et cetera, et cetera. So no, you're right. They do have a lot of, they wear many hats.
Yes.
On top of also sending packages. And they pay out, they're the ones, if you get Social Security, you go to the post office to collect Social Security, which is kind of a weird, it's fun, but it's like the first of the month, it's just a bunch of people leaving the post office with a couple €1,000 in their pocket. Wild. And so that's paid time off. It's basically, yes.
And in addition, so there's a mandatory 4-week vacation time that they have to give you, right? But you have to take 2 weeks.
Thank you. Yes, you have to, legally have to take 2 weeks.
At least 2 weeks, I guess.
Of that paid time off. And it's interesting, I will say, like without starting any sort of, anything. No, I think as like America has an idea that work is like, you should just be like working yourself to the bone without pause, without breaks for 40 years, and then, then you get to retire and do whatever you want. And I think a lot of other countries, and Italy is one of them, where it's like, no, you need time off to recharge and to rest and to like visit your family
and to be a human.
And that can happen while you're also working. And I think there's a couple of them too, where I think Italy has a kind of a rule around too, like if you work too much, like overtime, you are capped and they cannot give you extra. It's like they can't give you extra vacation days for that. They can only give you money for that. Like there's something weird where it's, again, we don't have jobs in this country, but it seems like you can't, like even the days aren't banked. Like year to year, I think you can only bank them for like a year and a half before you have to use them or be paid for them, kind of thing. So it kind of prevents people from banking an entire, over the course of 10 years, banking like half a year's worth of vacation days, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so that kind of brings us a little bit to the sick leave, the sick pay, which is a thing in this country. You get 180 days paid sick leave per year, which sounds insane, but it's broken up in a kind of an interesting way. The first 3 days you're sick are called waiting days, and that's you are paid 100% of your normal salary. So, you have a fever, a cough, a cold, etc., then you're paid your normal rate. But between day 4 and day 25, I believe, you're only paid 50% of your normal rate. And after that, day whatever, it's basically 26 through 180, you're paid 66.66% of your normal salary. And essentially some of that comes from Social Security and some of that comes from, or the government, Social Security, not just the companies. And some of that comes from your salary. And essentially that's, I guess, supposed to be, you will not lose your house while you're sick. Essentially, it's like
which is really cool, because I feel like in the U.S., I mean, I haven't had any corporate jobs, but in the U.S., it feels like if you're sick, you lose your livelihood.
Yeah.
Where here in Italy, very amazingly, you don't.
And it seems like it's not an uncommon story for someone in the States to get sick, to have these, to be like, now I'm behind on medical bills and I can't go to work. The work drops you. Now you're farther behind on medical bills than you were before. It's just, it can easily spiral out of control. And here it doesn't spiral out of control because it's like, well, no, COVID was a great example. You get COVID, even if you get sick from COVID, you have 180 days, you're paid, you're fine. And then after that is when, I guess it can get a little weird. There are some other stipulations and things. Obviously COVID was a weird one in terms of that was for 2 years, 3 years. I think you couldn't get fired or anything like that for COVID. And in this 180 days, that's a big thing. You cannot get fired. Your contract is protected. It seems like it's up to the company if after 180 days they want to fire you or they want to do something with you, it's up to them, but you're good in those. And that kind of also brings us a bit to maternity/paternity leave. You have 5 months of maternity leave, whether you are giving birth or adopting a child, but you have to, at least for giving birth, you have to take 2 of those months before you give birth, prenatal, and then the other 3 afterwards.
Which is really interesting.
And I don't know if it's I don't know if it's a preventative thing. It's well, you can't just work up until the day you give birth because it could
It might be a welfare sort of situation, being you should not be working when you're also about to give birth to a child. Go relax, get prepared, stuff.
That's what it seems like, yeah. And then, of course, for the paternal leave, you have a whopping 10 days, and you can take those at any point in the first 5 months. And it's kind of, it seems, we've talked about this, I think, on other podcast episodes, but Italy as a culture has a very strong culture around not the nuclear family, but the extended family, I guess, a sort of forest family, a branching off family. I don't know what you would call it. Because the nuclear family is the 2 parents and then the kids.
Yeah.
But here it's very much grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, nieces, nephews, neighbors. Even when my mom's neighbor gave birth, it was everybody was coming with food, and then they're offering childcare, and they're offering this and they're offering that. And it's just it was for not not just the first week, but for the first year, it was we all chip in now. And so I think it seems it's one of those things where they think traditionally the dad's not, you're fine. You don't need to go home and do anything. And it's hopefully changing, because I think a lot of parents would like to go and, spend time with their newborn child or their newly adopted child, and not 10 days in the first 5 months. But I thought that was a little fascinating.
That's a good point, though. You just brought up adopted children. So all of this applies to whether you have a child biologically or if you're adopting a child. This applies,
yes.
Which is really cool. I don't know how it works in the U.S., but I do have the sense that people who are adopting children, there are a lot of barriers to, creating your family that way. So
it's interesting.
Pretty cool.
And I think that's kind of the last of the carrots. There's a lot of other carrots, tons of carrots galore. It's if you're a donkey, you'd love it here kind of thing. I don't know. That makes no sense. But no, I think there's a lot of benefits to working, in terms of there are a lot of little things like that are kind of protect the humanity side of having a job rather than the corporate side. One of the sticks is the taxes. And I did want to mention this one because I think, again, in the States, there's this idea that Europeans pay 80-something% taxes. So you go home at the end of the day with $12. And that's not 100% accurate. It's a pretty good representation, but it's not 100% accurate. And essentially every prime minister, every time people are elected, somebody else has a new idea of how to like revamp the tax system. And I think just this year, 2025, or it might have been, I think it's 2025 is the first time there are 3 tax bands instead of 4. BANDS.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. That was good. I'm like, oh, I dropped the D there. And it's essentially if you make, I think it's under 25,000 euros, you pay 23% taxes. And then there's a middle band where it's like 30 something percent. And then over 50,000 euros, you pay, I think it's 46% taxes.
43?
43. Okay. So it's 20. Is it 23 to 43?
Yes.
Cool.
I think that's what I wrote down.
Perfect. Thank you. I wanted to have that because I'm like, there are going to be too many numbers. I'm already talking about this, working holiday visa with a lot of numbers.
This is not a math podcast.
This is not a math podcast. So yes, there are high taxes for sure. And that doesn't include municipal taxes. That doesn't include the region will have their own taxes and the town you live in will have their own taxes, but that's never higher than 3%. It seems like it scales between like 0.5% and 3%. I think most towns don't even have taxes, like a little city tax, because they get federal funding and everyone's like, I'm not paying you guys money to do anything.
But that's different than income tax, right?
Yes.
Okay.
This is just income tax.
Got it.
It also seems like it's different than Social Security. Some places had this separate, some places had these bundled together.
Oh.
I don't know if there's confusion on it. I feel like there shouldn't be on paying taxes. But it seems like that is just income tax, not Social Security. There's a 10% pay. You have to pay Social Security's 10%. And then the employer, though, pays 30%. Mm-hmm. So in theory, you're paying 40% on Social Security, which seems insane, but I guess not when your employer pays 30% of it. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if it's 10% of this 23 or 43 or 10% of everything, because otherwise I'm like, that money does start disappearing real quickly. And so, yeah, you do get this sort of, reduced income. But as you can kind of tell from this, the bands are between 25 and 50,000 euros. And as we talked before, Italy on average does not make a lot of money. I think we talked about, I think, the student visa. If you make more than 9,000 some odd euros a year, that's the poverty income. I think in the States, their poverty line's like 20 something thousand.
I think so.
So it's a bit of a different, you need like essentially half the money in Italy to live as you do in the States, just dollars to donuts kind of thing. But arguably a lot less, because even when we look at, we mentioned that last episode, there is that website that you can compare cost of living, and it's not a perfect comparison. It's user submitted data and it's not always up to date. But we looked at Rome versus where we're from in Savannah in the States, and Savannah is like 60 or 70% higher cost of living than Rome. It was just like, you could live in Rome for cheaper than Savannah. So I thought that was fascinating, just in terms of, I would like to do that instead. And most of that is rent, and some of that's utilities. So it makes kind of sense in terms of, they're thinking you're spending a lot more on rent, and then they're probably assuming you're going to run your air conditioning in the summer in Italy, but in Rome, no one owns an air conditioner, so you're out of luck there. And I think that's kind of the biggest stick, I think, when it comes to working in Italy. I think a lot of people have the idea that they don't even want to look into the taxes. Mm-hmm. So they're like, I don't even want, that's like out of my thought process, this idea that it's going to be so expensive to pay taxes that I just can't even, think of living. But I think something you and I always consider is that if like you made 20 grand in Italy and you're only paying 23 for this and 10% for that tax, and then X amount for your housing, let's say you can save about 10,000 a year because your housing is very cheap and food's cheap and things like that. It's like, how much would you need to make in the States to save 10,000 a year? Right. Because I have a friend in California who makes like 38 and he doesn't save any a year. It all goes towards rent and food and car and payments and this and that. And my brother lives in Savannah and he makes 30 and he saves about, I think it's like 1,100 a year is what he can save. And when he's budgeting, and he doesn't budget, so there's a little just drive-by insults on my brother there. But no, I think about that often, because it's like, how much money do you have to be making in the States to save 10,000 versus here? And here, I mean, we're in the middle of nowhere. So obviously Milan, we've talked about this before, is a lot more you have to make to save 10,000 a year than in Rome, than in, Reggio Calabria or something like that. It's just somewhere that's really cheap. So,
but it is worth doing the general math to see what you might be saving if you do take time to come work here.
Absolutely.
And a couple notes on the taxes and Social Security. You told me earlier off, Mike, that if you make less than 8,000, you don't have to pay taxes, right? Because that's the...
You don't have to file taxes, I guess,
Oh,
or
okay.
pay them.
Okay.
Because
And that's basically the minimum. That's the poverty line.
that's below the poverty line.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of, I think in the States, it's like 200, 300 is, I think if you make more than that, you have to file taxes. It's a super low amount because it's essentially like, I mean, even they'll tell too, like if you're a kid who's like mowing lawns and you made more than that, you have to file taxes.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit, not ridiculous, but certainly weird in terms of like, oh, really trying to come up with, make sure like nobody's making $300 in the States and living,
Right.
So it's kind of like, you're probably fine. And here, I think that's what the stance they take. They're like, no one who makes less than 8,000 is comfortable. So don't even worry about filing taxes. But you also have time to pay. That's the other thing. You have to pay, I think, the first installment in June and then the second installment in November or in October of your taxes. So they don't also, like, when you do have to pay taxes, it's not like, oh my God, I have to hit this, 8,000 euro tax bill all at once. It is, you can space it out a little bit. But as I've just said out loud a second ago, it is not taken out over. It's like, I think in the States that you can have it taken out here and there. And then at the end you settle up, like, oh, I do owe you guys an extra grand, or, hey, you know what? I took the standard deduction and you actually owe me a little refund. Here, it seems like by and large, you keep track of it. And at the end of the year, you pay whatever you owe over 2 installments.
That's an interesting system. I didn't realize that.
Well, and I'm now giving you guys more information than you ever possibly wanted on Italy's tax system, and I do apologize. But if the four of you who are listening to this thinking about living here, it does help. There are some flat tax systems that you pay between 5 and 15%. So 5, I think it's like 5 under 25,000, 10 between 25 and whatever it is, and above 50,000 you pay 15% tax. That's flat. That's it. But you cannot deduct anything from that. So but on the other tax system, we pay like 43% over 50,000. There are so many deductions that you can take in Italy in terms of, even like during COVID, I think it was in 2022, 2023, they had this plan. You go to Sicily, vacation. If you go for like 2 nights, they'll pay for an extra night for free. And how it works is you let them know, you submit the receipt that you went to, that you did 3 nights in Sicily, and they will refund you on your taxes 100 and something or 1,000 and something for wherever you stayed for that third night. And it can be like, I think you can up to 2 or up to 3 nights free. So if you went for 6 or 9 nights, they'd give you 2 or 3 nights for free, which I thought was fascinating. But if you're a new homeowner, if you're a homeowner in general, your mortgage payments, certainly family things, if your certain vacations are like tax deductible. I mean, there are so many deductions you can take in Italy that you can actually bring your tax, you made 75, but you can bring it way on down to like 12,000 is actually what you get taxed on. So it's an interesting system, I think. And I honestly, though, I wish I looked up how many people in Italy on average make over 100,000 euros, because that does seem like it'll be difficult to bring 100,000 all the way down, but not, 70. You can kind of bring that down past 50, possibly, depending if you bought like a new car or house or something like that.
Interesting.
Yeah, because I know in the States, though, it's almost like not a joke, but it's like if you're self-employed, there's all those things like everything you do is you should be paying nothing in taxes, and obviously corporations don't pay taxes anyway, so who knows really. But yes, and I think the place I wanted to bring up very, very, very briefly, this digital nomad visa, is in relation to what we're going to talk about in a second. And there's something called the self-employment visa, and there is a bit of a difference in terms of taxes there. I think the digital nomads have to make more money, but they are allowed to pay less in taxes, at least for the first few years. I think it's like an introductory rate of 5% for the first few years, similar to what we just talked about a second ago with the flat tax rate. I think the self-employment does not get that sort of that introductory rate, but as we're going to talk about in a second, it's because it's a lot easier to apply for the self-employment visa than it is the digital nomad visa.
And did we already talk about the difference between the paying Social Security as a self-employed person? You pay a lower amount.
You pay a higher amount.
Yes, that's the one.
But I think the same thing in the States. I think in the States, the Social Security rate is 14%. Because I know that when you work for I pay, like if I'm employed, I pay 7, they pay 7, something like that. But if you're self-employed, you pay 14%.
Right.
It's the same thing here, except it is a little bit reduced. So I think if you have a job, you pay 10, the employer pays 30. but if I'm not mistaken, it's 26.
26 if you're self-employed. You pay
26% if you're self-employed. So it's a heftier, contribution. However, it also doesn't necessarily have to go to, as we're aware, to the extent of we're aware, it might not be the full extent of this, but there are different unions that you can pay that to instead. We have an architect friend who pays, instead of paying Social Security to the state, he pays it to a union, because when he retires, the union is what pays out his Social Security, not the state. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times there's like certain artisan trades and things like that will have a very specific union, and they're the ones who will pay out your Social Security, and they're the ones who if you need their lawyers, is you get their lawyers kind of thing, which is kind of an interesting system. So it does decentralize the Social Security a little bit. So it prevents it just being the country of Italy. It's like, oh no, there's a bunch of different unions that will actually pay out instead.
Yeah, it's an interesting system.
So the work visa, here we are. Finally, 30 minutes in. I have monologued so long. I apologize, dear listeners. I've tried to make it as quick as possible.
Okay, so let's get into the work visa.
Let's get in.
It's a bit dry, but I'm going to make it. I'm going to try to sound happy so that it doesn't sound dry. Okay, so I think the most complicated or the biggest barrier to entry for this work visa is that there is only a small window in which you can apply for this work visa anywhere in Italy, right? So it's only open for a few months every 1 to 2 years, right? It is currently open. There's a window that's open, right?
It is.
Okay. However, just because the window's open doesn't mean that you just go ahead and apply. You have to already have a job set up in order to be applying for this work visa.
Or job promised to you, yeah.
Right. You have to be essentially hired for
right.
a job. And so basically this window is called the flow decree. And we're going to be calling it that, not the Italian word, but the Italian term is the decreto flussi, which is so fun.
Flussi,
flow. Okay. So every year or 2 years that this window is open, there's a different allotment of open jobs.
If I may, though, jump in real quick. Mm-hmm. I was going to say, because you're saying every year or two, historically it's every year or two, but in the last 10 years it's been every year because there is such a opening of jobs. And every year has actually been, I think from 2015 to 2025, it went from 70,000 job openings to 170,000 job openings. Mm-hmm. So every year they are looking for more and more people to come and fill these jobs. So in case every year or two it's I think historically sometimes they don't need anybody, but in the last 10 years at least they've been needing more people every year.
That's fascinating.
I don't know if it'll change.
No, I think it will probably increase because a lot of Italians are going to other countries for jobs, and a lot of people aren't having kids, as we've talked about before. So there are more and more jobs that are open.
Exactly.
So this year it is a whopping 165,000 job openings, which is really a lot, it seems like.
It is, but I was going to say, actually, just as an example, if I may bring up another country, I just read about Spain. They had, I think, one of the biggest growing economies last year in 2024. I think it grew by 3.5% of their GDP. Italy, by example, was 0.5%. And I think the German economy shrunk by 0.2%. So it was weird that Spain exploded. They added something like 468,000 jobs last year. 408,000 were filled by immigrants. And they were talking essentially we need people coming who are immigrants because just like Italy, they have no one is having kids. They have people are losing faith in sort of the future of Spain just because they're what is here for us. And so they're but we've created all these jobs. A lot of them hospitality and tourism industry. But still they're that's 468,000 jobs we just created and filled with people who were just immigrants who are here. Awesome. And I think Italy has had the different party. I think the prime minister of Spain, I believe, is Socialist Party. Prime minister of Italy is not. Mm-hmm. And she's a bit on the far right. And they just have a very, very anti-immigration stance, which is fine. But as we've seen the last 10 years, they have such a opening for jobs that's only getting bigger and bigger. And they seem to, and again, these are not, as you're going to mention in a second, these are not what I think most people would say skilled workers in the sense of IT or accountants or lawyers or things like that. These are jobs, bus drivers.
Blue collar.
Blue collar, yeah, exactly.
Say in the States, yeah.
Blue collar. So it's just, and some of them are as you're going to mention just in a second, they're temporary. No, not temporary. What is it?
Transitory?
Yeah, I guess it's like when you come to your like
Seasonal?
seasonal.
Seasonal.
That's the word they use. So some of them are seasonal, some are not. But it is interesting only because it is a good way to look at how two different countries, Spain and Italy, are viewing like immigration specifically, and how one of them is viewing it as this terrible thing, but realizing that they have such a lack of workers that they're having to expand this program larger and larger, and the other one's viewing it as a good thing, and that's only adding to their growth as a country.
Absolutely. I hope that Italy starts learning from Spain's choices, because Spain is doing really well with their economy because they are accepting of immigrants, and Italy is not doing well in that regard.
And if I may, just since we're just talking about this very quickly, I know people listening will be like, that's not, but we're 40,000 federal workers in the United States were just illegally fired from their jobs, probationary or this and that. And even people who had already taken like the buyout option are now being fired anyway and not given the money. It's a whole thing. It is a disaster. And that does not include, I don't think, a lot of the people who were on these federal grants in terms of like scientists or people who were operating anything. And it seems like on the outside, like being in this Italy on the outside, I'm like, there's such an opportunity there to hire people who know about land management, who know about wildfire management, because Italy, believe it or not, does have wildfire issues, as it is Spain.
Yeah, a lot
flooding,
big,
things
big
like that. I'm
problems.
like, you have these people who are scientists, top of their fields, doing crazy research, and Italy is experiencing a massive brain drain right now, just like I think Spain, just like Portugal, just like Greece, just like what's called the PIGS countries, Portugal and Italy, Greece and Spain. Just making sure I'm like, what are the four? And no, I'm like, this is a perfect opportunity. But instead, as we've talked about, I think a couple episodes ago, we talked about how now even the blood right citizenship for Italy has gotten even harder to get, and how they're closing so many doors. And it's like, there's an opportunity that is there for, and I think even Canada's like somewhat jokingly taken advantage of the opportunity in terms of like, if you have just been fired and you want a job. But it seems like that is a beautiful opportunity in order to actually jumpstart your reversal of the brain drain, because a lot of Italians do not want to come back, even if there were better, like different jobs. Like, no, I want to live somewhere else. So I feel like you have to find the people who want to live here and then encourage them to do so. And it is not very encouraging when they make this so unbelievably hard and create so much competition for, what is just a 1 year long visa that you have to then get again next year.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
So, I apologize. The rant is over.
No, that was good. That's a good rant. And we should also say that our hearts go out to everybody who's essentially illegally lost their jobs in the U.S. There's a lot of stuff going down over there, and we're reading the news, and we're really sorry to all of you who
Genuinely,
are in a lot of distress right now. So let's talk about getting a job in Italy.
Beautiful segue. Beautiful.
Okay, so this window is currently open, and in 2025, there are 165,000 jobs that are open. We're not going to go into every single category or every single country that these are open to. However, we will do our best to put a link to some helpful articles, essentially, in the description, because this is not just 165,000 jobs that are open to everybody. It is broken down by country your home country and what kind of job you want and things like that.
Yeah, and they are, like I said, you're going to break it down in a second. They are, again, not just super specific, like IT or accountant or something like that. Some of these are just, if a town needs like somebody to do the waste management, like the garbage trucks, it's like sometimes that will be something they're hiring for if they can't find somebody else to do the job.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it seems like it's basically, this is open to any Italian company who cannot find somebody to fill the job can put out a job listing on this thing, the flow decree.
Yeah. Well, why don't you break it down? You seem to know a lot about it.
I really don't. I promise. The breakdown is essentially on three different levels. It's the seasonal workers. You say there's 165,000, and I believe that one of the numbers I read was like 108,000 of these jobs this year are seasonal work.
Yeah, it's predominantly seasonal work.
Definitely. And that is agriculture, construction, and hospitality. And I believe you have a note somewhere that says in October, it's for hotel workers or something?
Yeah, so it's a bit complicated in the window is open now, but specifically there is a secondary window that opens in October of this year, 2025, for hospitality workers.
And it kind of seems, my understanding of it is like, the Lake Como, the north, people are going to go skiing. They're going to have northern things, or maybe I guess Sicily if they have like a somewhat, they want to go south in the 70s for the weather. But it seems like everybody who I guess who didn't get in the first round can get in the second round if they want to do hospitality specifically, because at that point, agriculture and construction will pretty much grind to a standstill. Nobody's working construction in cold weather.
I know that we'll get into the whole process of how you apply for these things, but essentially your visa, your work permit here will last for the duration of your job, but up to 2 years essentially, and then you have to renew it. Do you know for seasonal work if it's different? Do you get essentially like a year-long work permit, or are you hired for 6 months? Do you have any idea?
It seems like a lot of it is hired for closer to 6 months, or the job. If it's a construction job, you're hired for the job. If it's agricultural work, you're hired for the season. If it's hospitality, you're hired for, it could just be the season, it could be the year, it could be the job. So at least for seasonal work, it seems very dependent on the season, obviously.
Like your work contract specifically.
Yeah.
Okay.
But for the other, so that's about 100, usually 100, 110, like a giant portion of that. The other 65,000 is for the non-seasonal, is I think what they just call it. And that's for, I think I mentioned briefly a second ago, but like pharmacist, bus driver. I mean, like any other job in Italy would be considered non-seasonal. And if they cannot find somebody to hire in Italy, then they are allowed to kind of, it seems like, put the word out to the greater world. Interestingly on this, and I wanted to do some very brief research because those of you listening, you might have heard us talk about universities in the past couple of episodes and how you maybe can get a job through university. Well, in my exhaustive research, which included going to no fewer than 3 university websites, but no more than 6, somewhere between 3 and 6, all of the jobs I found required that you already have papers or a permit to work in the EU.
Really? That many did?
Yeah. And I thought it was interesting because even John Cabot, for instance, great example, just American University in Rome, hires people, I assume. And under there, they have it separated by 2, I guess, the teaching positions and administrative and staff. I go under administrative and staff, and it has one of the qualifications is you must have like the papers to work. I'm calling it the papers. I don't know. They have like, I think, a work permit to work in Europe. They say we do not sponsor anybody for this position. And I thought, okay, that to me tells me that you sponsor for some position. So I go to the teaching administrative things, and there's a couple teaching positions open with like tenure track available. But in all of these, you had to already have a work permit by the time you're applying. And I don't know if it, like they will sponsor the work permit and then you apply for the job, or if they meant you already have to be able to work. But I looked at there was a section about like former students who are now working, and all of them are Italian, or at least they all have Italian or European last names. Like I think one looked like she was Polish, and then actually there was one woman who looked like she was Polish, and the rest looked like they were Italian. Just
looked
like
or sound because of her name.
Oh, sorry, the name looked Polish,
okay.
Not like.
Just making sure you're not judging people by
She
their
was
faces.
blonde, so I guess Polish. No. It was like there's like Agostino was like one of the. I'm like, okay, that probably is Italian, and so I assume they're all like Italian students that are going to this university that are, or European students that are then staying on and they can work there. So it felt maybe like you can't necessarily get them to sponsor your work permit or work visa.
But certainly there are other schools that do.
There's got to be. I mean,
we know teachers who have worked internationally, not necessarily in Italy, but who have certainly worked internationally, and they get their visas through their work, through the school where they teach in English.
Exactly.
At an international school. So, and these are people who work at predominantly like elementary and middle and high schools, not colleges. So there certainly is a way to do that.
And there might be like a website or something. There might be some sort of place where if you are a teacher and you're listening to this and you're like, this actually sounds good, because we know a lot of teachers who spent at least a year traveling and teaching. Like that was their thing. Like, oh, I was stationed, or not stationed, but I was placed in a school. And we've even talked to teachers who are like, oh, it's a common thing that you actually move. What direction is that? East? Yeah. You move east. Like a lot of teachers will start in Europe and then they are stationed or go somewhere in Oman or Dubai or United Arab Emirates. And then they're stationed somewhere in like Southeast Asia or Japan. And then finally Australia, New Zealand. And then finally, then they're like, okay, that was it. But it seems like the more accreditation you have, or the more seniority you have, the more east you can move. At least is how it's explained to us. And some people end up stopping wherever they are because they like the culture more. But I thought that was interesting because it seems like there must be some setup, some sort of, whether it's a management company or headhunter company or.
Well, I looked at, it was like a primary school, an elementary, middle school, it seemed like, in Rome, and it's an international school. And I couldn't find information on their site specifically for if they sponsor visas, but you can apply for a job through their website. And they also said that they typically hire through recruiting agencies. So that would be a recruiting agency in your home country, for instance, in the States.
That makes sense.
So it seemed to me that for them, if you go through a recruiting agency, that agency might help you get a work visa in another country.
That makes sense. That actually makes a lot of sense. And because I'm curious, some of these too, like when I once applied to be an au pair in France, and it was really crazy, but if y'all want to be an au pair, it is not that hard, apparently. They would just give kids to anybody.
Well, the job is difficult, though.
Well, no, I meant, yeah.
But to get the job, maybe.
Yeah, no, I applied to an agency, and I didn't have a passport at the time. Like, I was waiting for the passport to arrive. She's like, okay, just reach back when you have a passport. But then she, like, the next day, she sent, like, 5 families who were already interested. And I was like, yo, I don't have a passport. You can't just, like, send me people. What are you talking about? This isn't even a background check. Like, I didn't have the proper paperwork to do this. It was wild. I think though she was mentioning too, there's just sometimes the families, like if it's a young man, they prefer it because it's like they have kids who are like really rambunctious or this and that. And they think that like, oh, if you're a young man, you'll play with the kids. I'm like, I will not. Can I have one where I don't have to do as much, please? But
I don't think you should have been an au pair. Can I have a job where I don't have to take care of children?
Yeah. Well, I think at the time it was like because I went to the same agency as a friend did, and she had, I think it was like 4 days a week she had to take care of kids. But one of her friends was 1 day a week she had to take care of kids. They're paid the exact same amount of money. They're both given an apartment by the family. And I'm like, so it seems like a luck of a draw. So I was like, maybe I'll get lucky. And it was like, no, they all seemed like this is intense. So all that being said is I don't know if Italy has something similar, because I don't know if like if it's a work visa you're working under as an au pair, or if that's a seasonal thing, or I don't know how that works.
It must be some sort of visa though, because our friend who was there for more than 3 months.
Oh yeah, no, she was there for a year. So I don't know if it's just a work visa, like a seasonal work visa for a year, or how that works. Because I think Italy doesn't really have au pairs, but I don't know, they all passant. I don't know. That's still French. That's a chess term. So I don't really know. Sorry, moving on.
No,
I'm
that's
actually
good.
moving back to exactly what we're talking about.
So getting back to Italy.
Sure.
Basically, shall I run through kind of what you need for your work visa, just so people are prepared? Okay, so I'm going to go through this list pretty quickly. So what happens is you apply for the job, and then your employer fills out the nulla osta, and that is essentially a work permit. So they fill that out, and then they send that to you, and then you apply for your work visa. So you're going to need a copy of your work contract. You're going to need the original nulla osta and a copy, a completed application for a long stay visa, and then your passport. And this passport has to be valid for 3 months past your contracted work date, essentially.
That makes sense.
You need proof of accommodation. That's one that we keep talking about, that it feels hard to get, but you need essentially proof that you have a place to stay. You're not going to be living on the streets.
And it was mentioned the last episode, if you guys listen to the How to Rent Apartment in Italy, if you do get hired through an Italian company, you can absolutely ask your boss and they'll hook you up with either with somebody or somebody who can help you find an apartment, and they'll get you a contract that says if your visa is approved, then you're gonna have an apartment to live in, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next thing you need is proof of sufficient financial means, and that is going to be essentially a bank statement and or proof of your income with this new job. And you need proof of your paid visa fee, and sometimes you're going to need to prove that you have like a diploma and certificate. That seems a little less important because you've already proved that to where you're getting a job. And
I will say that when we talk about, just as in a second, the self-employment visa, you will need to show that you've either had a college degree or experience.
Oh, good to know. Okay.
Yes.
This one seemed weird to me because you, like we've said before, you can come here for a seasonal job, and you don't necessarily need a college degree for a lot of seasonal jobs. So, okay, case by case. Interesting. And you're also going to, so when you have all of that paperwork together, you're going to take that to the Italian immigration office, which is the consulate
Yeah, okay.
in your home country. So you have to take it there personally. This whole big packet of paperwork.
I just want to throw this out to any Americans listening. There are like, I think 4, maybe 5 in the States you can actually bring it to. At least I know for us, they're chopped up by part of the country you live in. But I think for like southeast of the United States, Miami is your consulate. So I think you can't just bring, because like there's different ones. Immigrations might not have like a, because I thought Atlanta had an Italian consulate or something like that, but it doesn't have like the judge that does all the a lot of the immigration paperwork like you need for your citizenship. So it's unfortunate that sometimes you have to take it in person. It's not a easy thing. Did you find out if you have to take it in person or it has to be delivered in person?
That's a good question. I read it as if you have to take it in person, but I know that you had someone take your passport to one of the consulates.
I did, yeah.
Right?
When I applied for a visa for China and it had to be delivered in person, it didn't have to be me. So I sent it to somebody in Houston. I mean, like a company who does this. I didn't just mail it to somebody and with a note that says, "Please bring this to the consulate at your nearest convenience." And then they stamp it, and then the guy sends it back to me. Or the person or whoever it is.
Yeah, I don't know. I read it as if it has to be you, but that may be incorrect.
Okay.
And then once you've done all of that, and essentially you get a receipt, or you get this, it'll all be returned to you. Your passport will be returned to you, obviously. Then when you finally get to Italy and you're ready to start your job, your brand new chapter in your life, you have to, within 8 days of arriving here in Italy, you have to go to the questura and apply for a permesso di soggiorno, which is a residency permit.
And it's also, we talked about this too in the last, 2 episodes ago, the student visa. It's the same thing. If you're coming here on a student visa, you need to do the exact same thing.
And like we've said before, I think we mentioned this, this will last until your contract runs out, essentially, with your job. But that's
if it's fewer than 2 years.
Yes, fewer than 2 years, up to 2 years, I was going to say.
Oh, sorry.
But then, so you'll have to renew it after that period, but only that only works for 5 years. Can you explain that better?
I think, basically, it seems like from what we found that a work visa is only valid for 5 years. And you have to renew it every year or 2 years or however long your contract is, but it can't be longer than 2 year contract. But then at 5 years, it's like, nope, that was it. Thank you so much.
You'll have to apply for a permanent residency permit.
Visa. Yeah. Which is interesting because it seems like once you spent 5 years here and those 5 years on your work visa count, as long as it's consecutive, you can apply for a permanent residency visa, which seems like, as far as I can tell, you can work at any job. You're just, you're a citizen in everything but the citizenship part. And after another 5 years of being here on a permanent residency visa, you can apply for citizenship. Yeah. Is that, I was going to move on to the self-employment visa if that was the last bit about applying.
Yeah, let's, I have actually a question because I want to address if people can bring their families. Do you know if it's the same for people who are self-employed and people who are employed through, an outside company?
It seems like anyone can bring their family as long as they're dependent on them. So children or spouse or parents who are ill, as long as they make over that minimum amount.
Okay.
Because we talked about even on the student visa, I think that the state's the same way, but on a student visa, you can bring your family over. Because I think on the states, like sometimes if you're in the states on a student visa, but you have kids, you can bring your kids over. And I'm using the states as an example, but in Italy, it's the same thing. If you're a student and if you're in mid-40s, you can bring your entire family over, but you have to have the money to support them.
Okay, and for that, you'll have to apply for the family reunification visa.
Other people will have to, yeah.
They will have to. They can't just, you're not all on one visa.
Correct. Okay. I don't think so. I think it's family reunification, yeah.
It definitely is.
Oh, sorry. I thought it was a question.
Sorry, I didn't mean to phrase it that way. If you are getting a job here or if you're self-employed, your family need to come with you, then they need to apply for a family reunification visa.
Good to know. And then, so I was going to say the only thing about the self-employment I wanted to mention is because we talked about how, like I say, about 110,000 of these jobs are going towards the seasonal workers, 60,000 and change are going towards non-seasonal, 500 go towards the self-employment visa. And of those, it's 3 categories: freelancer, entrepreneur, and startup. It's weird, I will say. Well, it's weird because I think before there was a digital nomad visa, the closest was this self-employment visa. And just for an example, or not for example, just to give some information, after all this paperwork you get together, you have a job offer, you have an apartment offer, you have all the paperwork you need, you apply just like everybody else, but you are applying against 700,000 other people, because I think in 2024, there were 158,000 job openings and 700,000 applicants.
Wow.
So, and they don't tell you, they don't break it down for you. It doesn't seem like on who applied for what. So it could be of these 500 self-employment visa openings, they could have had 10,000 digital nomads who were like, oh yeah, I want to try out for that. Or the seasonal workers, same thing. It could have been like 500,000 applied for seasonal workers. They don't break it down because it does help. It seems like it helps a bit. Like if you have a family in the country, yeah, like use them, put them somewhere in your application, because it does seem to help. If that at least from what I found, that like if you have family, it can kind of help you in terms of like, oh yeah, I'm kind of not like under family reunification visa or anything like that, but if you have another reason to be here, it does seem to help. But for this self-employment visa, it's a bit interesting because you only need, I think what I found was 9,000 euros a year is how much you need to make. So about essentially the poverty line is what you need to make to be here on a self-employment visa, which is fascinating because you need 32,000 euros a year to be here on a digital nomad visa. Wild amount of difference. I think digital nomad visa, you need either 5 years of professional experience or 3 years of schooling and 6 months of professional experience. The 3 years of schooling does not need to be in whatever your field is. The digital nomad visa, you also need, I believe, a letters of intent from a couple different companies or people saying they will hire you and for how much they will pay you. That way, when you land, you have work. I don't think the self-employment visa has the same thing. You do need to have some sort of like proof that you made money doing this, obviously.
And I think for some of them, you need a business plan.
I think I read the startup needed a business plan, but a freelancer, an entrepreneur, if you already ran a business, like if you're like, I have a drop shipping business or whatever it is, then you don't actually need that. But I think almost all of these, they will want to know how it ties into Italy. That seems like the biggest thing, that it's like, if you're coming here to start a business, they're happy. But if you're coming here to start a business where you sell like drop shipped watches from Alibaba to people in the United States, it's probably less likely you're going to need a proof.
It's not a convincing case to be in Italy.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that was the biggest thing I found in terms of that self-employment visa. So, if I may give one other date, just this will all be in, if you've listened with us so far, I appreciate it, guys. This will all be in the description, but just in terms of date, the visa application window technically opens on February 5th. However, the application itself becomes available on November 30th. And they strongly recommend that you download the application, you fill it out, you get all the paperwork you need, and on February 5th is apparently called Click Day. It's where you click to submit. So it seems like February 5th is the day where everybody submits their applications that are already fully filled out. But if you're listening to this and you want to come next year, is an option, or as at the end of the year, as you mentioned before, it'll be open for the end of the year. For the hotel workers, also an option as well. So yeah, there are a lot of dates to keep in mind, but essentially, if that's something that is interesting to you, that is how you do it. Basically, November 30th that's the download day, and then February 5th is your click day.
I like that. And you mentioned something to me off mic earlier. It's called intra-corporate transferee visa. Do you know anything about that?
I do. And that is one of two types of, for those listening, there is the ICT, I think, intra-corporate transferee visa, and the EU Blue Card. And both of those are outside of the flow decree. So the flow decree is obviously, as you mentioned earlier, if a job needs to be filled and no Italian can fill it, they put it in and it's in the flow decree. There are a handful of ways to not circumvent it, but it's designed to ignore that.
Okay.
One of them is this ICT, the intra-corporate transferee, and it just means if you work for an American company or a Canadian company or an Australian company and they have an office in Italy, they can apply for this visa for you. I think they have to on your behalf, and they will transfer you over to their Italian office, and that does not count towards Italy's flow decree threshold.
Got it.
So there's no fear of being shut down if like, oh, well, we already filled it up. Too bad. No, if they're like, we are sending over one of our own people because this person knows what they're doing. You have to be with the company, I think, for like a minimum of 3 months. And then there's a few other things. There's a few other like things you have to kind of, it doesn't seem like it's just you can get hired and then immediately stationed or placed in Italy. It seems like you have to have already worked for the company, but it also seems designed to, like the 3 months, it's, I think even on the website for it even says like that's intended for you to go through a training period before you're stationed in Italy. So it seems like it's like for, if you speak some Italian, for instance, you might get hired by an American company who wants to station you in Italy to be their like Italian liaison. And the other one is the EU Blue Card. This is supposed to be, according to the EU website, this is the EU's answer to the American Green Card. I guess because blue is EU's color. And who knew? I mean, I guess we all did. There's a website, and we'll link that one in the description as well. And it's called like bluecard.eu or something ridiculous. And it seems like it is a marketplace, for lack of a better word, or like a window shopping place of you make an account and you make a profile. And it's like you're a teacher or you're...
Like LinkedIn.
Like LinkedIn. Except less social.
Okay.
It seems more like you put in who you are, your years of experience, what you do, a picture of your face, your CV, everything, and you post it up there. And companies who need to fill positions will go here and find people and be like, that's who I want. The two things, one, this is for all of the EU, so it's not just Italian companies, it's all in the EU that will be looking at this. Once you have the EU Blue Card, though, it seems like it's good for past your employment contract date, because it seems like the intent is once you're working here, you might want to continue working. So let's say you get picked up by a company in Germany. I think you have like 3 or 6 months after the termination date of your contract to then find work in the EU. And you will notice that some of these websites, like John Cabot I mentioned earlier, will actually have listed Italian work permit or EU Blue Card. So it is...
And you can get the EU Blue Card as a non-EU citizen?
You have to get the EU Blue Card as a non-EU citizen.
Okay. I guess I'm saying it's not for European citizens. It's
because a European citizen can work in Italy without...
Yes.
Anything.
Just checking.
But you do need, I think, English people would need, if you're from England or Scotland or...
Yeah, of course, because they're not EU.
Because they left.
Yep.
So just a little drive-by at England there. So this is designed for non-EU citizens.
Okay.
And this is to work anywhere in the EU. Obviously, each country has a slightly different, sometimes not so slightly different, immigration and residency laws. So that's just something to keep in mind in terms of sometimes work years, I guess, years you spent working in a country don't add towards your citizenship, and sometimes they do. Mm-hmm. It all depends based on the country, I guess, and the requirements. But yeah, that is just, so for those of you who are like, oh my gosh, I'd love to do this, that I think it's about 100 euros is for the EU Blue Card. It's 50 euros for a some sort of tax stamp, and then 50 euros to apply for the job or something. They have it on the website. It's two 50 euro payments. And I think one's for the card and one's for the application or something. And that will, again, get you at least a foot in the door. But I know we're getting a little long here. I will just wanted to touch back on, you mentioned the headhunter company or management company, recruitment company.
Recruitment agency.
It seems like if you can, it seems absolutely the way to go. If you have any interest at all in working in Italy or furthering a career in Italy, it seems the way to go is to find a recruitment company in your field and talk to them and see how they can get you, because a lot of these 700,000 applicants have someone helping them, like have an agency. And even like you talked to the Questura, the immigration office in Italy, when you and I go, I mean, almost everybody there has a lawyer with them to help them navigate. I mean, you and I don't, because we're thankfully just dropping off like some pictures or whatever it is.
Yeah, we happen to have a simpler situation than a lot of people, so we're very lucky that way.
But a lot of people have lawyers with them who handle a lot of this stuff, and greasing of the wheels and the palms and stuff like that. So
and speak the language,
which is huge. So if working here is definitely something that's interesting to you, that's the way to go. But as we've mentioned in the student visa episode, that is so much easier to get. It doesn't seem like it's capped at all. When the work visa is capped at 5 years, but the student visa is not capped at 5 years, which means like you can go undergrad, graduate, and then doctorate here. And then in theory, even apply for permanent residency when you're doing that, because we talked about in the student visa episode that those years you're here on a student visa count towards your citizenship, 10 years. You can also work for up to 20 hours on a student visa, as long as it's not like at a, you can't like be a lawyer here or a doctor for 20 hours.
There are certain jobs.
Yeah. But if you're just trying to be in Italy for a short time, and you're not from Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and South Korea, ideally if you're from the United States, then it seems like the student visa is so much easier than the work visa, which is just a nightmare followed by a lot of difficulties, followed by a very slim chance of getting approved, followed by 1 year of feeling safe, and then the whole process all over again. And I could you find anything on if you've been approved for the work visa, if you'd get not even automatically reapproved for next year, but like if there's a reapproval process?
I don't know. That's a good question. It seemed to me as though essentially if your work contract is renewed, then you just go through a renewal process of renewing your visa. You don't have to go back into the pool of 700,000 people or whatever it is. I think you just go to renew your.
That's what I found. That's what I found something along the lines as well. It's like, well, because that job wouldn't go, that job's already been filled by somebody. It wouldn't go back into the float or something like that. It was a little complicated.
I think it's a simpler process of just renewal.
Yeah. So once you're in, you are in, it seems like, which is good. And it seems, again, there are like teachers are always, especially teachers who speak English, are always in demand. But the biggest thing is to see, because sometimes they just cannot sponsor your work visa. So you have to figure out how to get over here, either with EU Blue Card or something else. Or again, all these teachers seem to be teaching abroad. So maybe there's some sort of global program that sponsors your work visa. But I think that's everything. Yeah.
One note that I know we've been talking about basically non-EU citizens. In case you are an EU citizen and you want to come work here, and you totally can, it's much easier to do it as an EU citizen. I just want to remind you, if you don't know, or tell you if you don't know, that when you get here, if you have a job, you still do have to apply for a permesso di soggiorno, the residency visa, within 8 days of arriving.
Even as an EU citizen? Really?
Yeah.
Why?
I think they just want to keep track of people, which sounds weird, but they just want to make sure that they know who's Italian and not, and who's filling jobs. I don't know. I made that part up, but you do definitely have to apply for a permesso di soggiorno if you want to work here as an EU citizen.
Because I thought when we looked into France, and I know obviously France and Italy are in the same country, that I thought when I looked into France, we didn't need one. If I was an Italian citizen, you could just go to France. But maybe you do. Maybe I missed that part of the research, and I should probably look into it a little more in depth now that I've known this. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And I believe that is everything, yeah?
I think that was pretty exhaustive.
And for those of you who are still listening, we should have put this at the top of the episode, we will not be back next week. We're going to be on holiday, as the English would say, or vacation, as the Americans would say. Fun little language lesson for you all. We're going to Venice for Carnavale, and then Florence for no real particular reason, but mostly because we want to talk about Carnavale and Florence, and Venice some more. So we will be back the week after talking about Carnavale, what it is, how to experience it, how to enjoy it. And then we are going to probably ramp up into some more city-specific episodes. And then we will dot in the episodes on digital nomad visa and the blood right citizenship as we learn about it and as we research it and accrue information. But as we realize people are starting to book their trips, we want to go ahead and start talking about some places that we haven't really touched on.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited.
So I think that's everything. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love for you to follow along. Click the follow button, subscribe button. We have a Blue Sky at Only a Bag. And we also have a website, onlyabag.com. If you'd like any articles or information, like I said, it has ads. But we appreciate you looking at those ads because it pays us a cent. And thank you also.
And you can contact us there if you have any questions or suggestions for episodes or anything like that.
Thank you all so much for listening.
Thanks for listening. Tanti abbracci.